Alrighty, thank you everyone for being here today at our Florida Digital Humanities Consortium webinar series for this summer. I have some fantastic presenters to introduce and a really awesome project. So I'm going to go through the presenter bios now, and then we can get into our presentation. Dr. Natália Marques da Silva is the 2022-2023 Digital Fellow for the Haitian Studies Association and Director of the Hand Art Center at Stetson University. She holds a PhD in Global and Social Cultural Studies from Florida International University. Her research focuses on enslavement memorialization, homecoming travel, and vestiges of colonialism in West Africa and the Americas. Dr. Darlène Elizabeth Dubuisson is the Assistant Professor of Anthropology at the University of Pittsburgh. Dr. Dubuisson received her PhD from Columbia University in 2020. Her research interest in teaching span political and legal anthropology, activist and engaged anthropology, Black feminist anthropology, Black intellectual histories, migration and transnational studies, and speculative fiction and visual culture. Dr. Dubuisson's current book project, Reclaiming Haiti's Futures, Returned Intellectuals, Placemaking, and Radical Imagination, is based on ethnographic fieldwork conducted in Port-au-Prince between 2013 and 2018. Dr. Laura Wagner is an independent scholar and the Haitian Creole team lead of Respond Crisis Translations, a collective of language activists providing trauma-informed interpretation and translation services for migrants and refugees. From 2015 to 2019, Dr. Wagner was the project archivist for the Radio Haiti Archive at Duke University's Rubenstein Rare Book and Manuscript Library. She holds a PhD in cultural anthropology from UNC Chapel Hill. A writer of fiction and nonfiction, she is currently writing a book that weaves together the story of Radio Haiti and its archive with her ethnographic research and personal experiences of the 2010 Haiti earthquake. Dr. Petrouchka Moise is a Haitian artist and scholar currently serving as an assistant professor and cultural and community-based digital curator at Grinnell College Libraries. She teaches classes on visual material and curatorial studies, focusing on the Caribbean. Dr. Moise is deeply committed to enhancing the language experience of the academic and cultural community. In her role as cultural and community-based digital curator, she develops interdisciplinary initiatives that promote diversity and inclusivity. Currently a 2020 CLIR Mellon postdoctoral fellow in data curation for Haitian visual arts. She works jointly with the Grinnell College Library and the Waterloo Center for the Arts as a central role in coordinating the Haitian Art Digital Crossroads project to create a digital hub for network of online resources in Haitian and Caribbean studies. In this presentation, they will outline an HSA, which is the Haitian Studies Association, initiative to aggregate and index Haiti-related publications, resources, and syllabi on health on a self-hosted repository. And thank you so much for coming, and we're so excited to hear your presentation.
Yeah.
We can't see the title. We can't see anything. It just says loading. That's why I'm waiting.
Oh, okay. I'm so
sorry. I didn't realize that I was the only one or that you didn't see that.
No, so on my end, it shows the presentation. On everyone else's end, it shows loading. Oh. Okay, let me try again.
There we go.
Thank you all for being here today. We are here to present our kind of project in progress, which is a multilingual repository of open-ish access materials that the Haitian Studies Association is currently working on. As Mia said, we are Darlène Dubuisson, Natália Marques da Silva, Petrouchka Moise, and me, I'm Laura Wagner. I think we'll just hand it over to Darlène to briefly talk about the origins of the project.
Thank you so much for the invitation, and to those of you in the digital world who are joining us today. You know, it's interesting. I didn't reflect much on the beginnings of the projects because it seems like we couldn't figure out where it began. So I put in my, like I tend to do when I can't figure out timelines, I go to my email and I put in the search, Decolonizing Haiti, and to kind of figure out where did this conversation start. And it started, of course, with the Haitian Studies Association when I was a board member on the Emerging Scholars Committee. And it was in the midst of COVID. And as many of you can attest, COVID challenged us to come together in different ways. And it challenged those of us and the Haitian Studies Association who had really met in person once a year as an association to find ways of staying connected and ways of continuing through the pandemic. And we started to have these programs, right, online. And one of them was called Decolonizing Haitian Studies. And it was a town hall. In the town hall, we invited our members, which, you know, could range between 200 or 300 folks, to really think about what would decolonizing Haitian studies look like, and what are the barriers that we face as an association? What are the ways in which we can begin to or reflect on the past, might have been at that point 31 or 32 years, and moving forward. And what came across, what was very central was the ways in which we as an association were perpetuating this divide between academics in the global north and the global south, not intentionally, but because a lot of us who are able to attend the meetings in person, et cetera, are scholars in the global north and take certain things for granted, like access to journals and articles through our institutions. It became very clear that in my own work, so my research is on Haitian intellectuals, and I did work with academics across Port-au-Prince since 2013, and I taught at the State University of Haiti. And some of the kind of frustrations academics that I worked with, my mentors, my students, was their inability to be in evolving conversations in their field for two reasons. One was that it became quite difficult to get certain subscriptions through let's say the National University. It's not that they didn't have subscriptions to journals, it's that it's expensive, right? And then the other one was the dissemination of texts in Haiti itself and how much effort and time that takes, and libraries. So really the library systems, et cetera. So really thinking about the actual copies of books. And then the digital copies being difficult to access. Another thing is that a lot of what was being accessed, created, given the global knowledge economy, was in English. And by the time something gets translated to French and it arrives in Haiti, the conversation, my interlocutors would say, had already moved on. Another thing is that those with whom I worked created and wrote and did analyses and were doing really great research, often in French or in Creole, and publishing in journals in the country. And those did not enter what we would understand as, the scholarly production. And it really reflected colonial hierarchies of knowledge that center scholarly production in the North, talking about the South, and saying things like Haitians need to analyze, et cetera, and not recognizing that it's not that intellectual production is not happening. It's that the systems of dissemination themselves are such that it keeps the conversation from being transnational. We think the conversation is transnational, but oftentimes it's unidirectional, us speaking to them. And really, the sense of decolonization really needs to think about the relationality in both sides. It's not only that our scholars in Haiti need access or desire access to stuff that we're writing over here, but that we also need access to the production that they're creating with the knowledge that they have on the ground and their theoretical knowledge. And so what came out of the town hall meeting was this kind of question, like, how do we incorporate more equally scholars, intellectuals, academics, artists in Haiti into Haitian studies, recognizing not only their contributions, but also recognizing the ways in which we perpetuate colonial hierarchies of knowledge through our very existence, right, in the systems of higher education in the North. And so that's kind of the impetus for it, right? And one of the things I was like, okay, what are the models? And the models was open access, right? And there's just so many issues with open access. And the issues have to do, and we'll talk about this later on, with copywriting. Like, again, these systems that create the inequalities in the global knowledge economy are deeply embedded and sometimes invisible. When we as scholars are writing things and we have this copyright, the copyright clause that we write and the various paywalls and all of these things are really difficult. Why would one spend $50 to access a 30-page article when we could share it with each other? But then there are limitations to the sharing, and what version does one share? And then there are limitations in terms of what is citable and what is considered scholarly knowledge. And then we have to consider journal rankings, right? And who we cite and how citational practices are support the institutions that where we work, where we get our degrees, and the ways in which we can really think through that. So I guess I'll stop there to say that was how the idea came about, a very particular moment of really trying to use what technology we had access to, but didn't realize it, right? But that COVID made us very aware that perhaps we can use a digital platform to decolonize Haitian studies. Thanks. Can't hear you, Natália.
Sorry, so much for Digital Fellow. Sorry about these issues, everyone. So from the conversations that Darlène and others had, they were able to put together a digital fellowship, enabling us to see how can we bring this database to life. The title that we have been working with is Conduite Connaissance, which we can talk about a little bit later. In the beginning, in defining the project scope, we really thought about 3 points of data that we wanted to include, and these were publications, resources, syllabi, and we thought we would aggregate all of these in a database that would allow people to search for the different types of content that they wanted to explore. And then within that, we had to select some parameters just because this project has the potential to be too ambitious. So we started out with the date, thinking primarily about contemporary publications, things that are happening in the last 5 to 10 years on the topic. So things that are really moving the conversation towards decolonization or anti-colonization, and then publication status. So we would accept materials that have already been published out into the world without, for example, considering drafts. So that's how we began to define the scope of the project.
And, you know, as Darlène spoke of, the whole kind of impetus here was to create an open access resource. And very quickly and very obviously, it was apparent that there's kind of this fundamental tension between creating an open access resource and copyright. And the HSA board, understandably, you know, has been concerned about, well, obviously we want to make something that is accessible to as many people as possible and provides as many people as possible with access to these publications, but we also don't want to get sued. And so this is something that we're still working on. The idea that I am personally kind of most excited about is this kind of loophole, which is publishing the author's original manuscript. So the same text, the same material as appears in the published version, but without the formatting. And often there are actually rules that authors can share that freely. And then, you know, we've also discussed different levels of access. So having things that are truly open access, things that are HSA members only, and then things that are by request to the author. And while that kind of eliminates some of the potential legal challenges, it also isn't necessarily in the spirit of what we're trying to do here, which is decolonizing knowledge.
Very good. And so these questions, as Laura mentioned, are still up in the air, but we kind of came into a point where we said we need to start building what we're trying to build, and let these questions be things that we figure out as we go. Otherwise, we wouldn't move forward. So our very next plan of action was to choose a platform, and in this case, for a prototype or the first and second iteration of what the project would be. And these are just what we took into account: the cost, the labor, so how many people would work, how many hours we'd have to put into it, the time, the number of users, the number of records. And one of the issues that we found is that in order to have the optimal platform that could really make this happen and be the best that it could be, that we needed thousands and thousands of dollars. And when we would speak to different companies and attempt to say, you know, working with open source, the options that we had that were free were frowned upon. In the end, we ended up deciding to choose a platform that would be also open source, that could work for us. And then as the project grew, we could then think about, okay, let's upgrade to a platform that can better suit the project as it grows, rather than allowing the question of platform to prevent us from moving forward. So in developing a prototype, we thought that in order to make it sustainable, we would house data in multiple formats and locations. So multiple computers, multiple accounts. So think about it sort of like you have the information in your personal computer. I'm sharing it with Laura, I'm sharing it with Petrouchka, I'm sharing it with Darlène. They have it in their accounts. And we would have, for example, we ended up going with WordPress. We would have our WordPress site, but because we know there are issues, a lot of different issues with WordPress, which we can talk about later, we wanted to make sure that the same data exists in, for example, spreadsheets. And Word documents, so that if something were to happen with this platform that we were building, we would still have all of the data. And then for accessibility purposes, we thought, let's have the minimum amount of features, the minimum amount of plugins or apps, a very simple aesthetic, and then that the content would be multilingual. We felt that even though we can't guarantee access for everybody, that these approaches would at least increase the amount of people who could benefit from the project. So here is a look into different aspects of our website. So our features are at a minimum. So we start out with complete connaissance, and that allows people to have an index and a homepage for the project. We allow people to search through. We have options for languages. We created a page just to give people information on how did the project come about, what is the project. The news section is simply updates. We allow people the opportunity to contribute right on the front page. There's a login system. It's one of our ways to bypass issues, is to have members be able to log in and have access to things that maybe we're not able to publish right in the open. And then in Browse, we are working in developing these different pathways so that people can either browse for fun, searching for anything, or they can direct their search a little bit better. In our front page, to make it as direct as possible, we start out with a brief description of the project. We've already read this, and then we have the button so people can read more. We then, in speaking to the question of open access, right away have definition of these terms that we use throughout the platform so that people can right away know, is this open access? Is this something that's members only? And is this available on request? And the second two options are some of the ways that we are getting around access. That's why we say openish access. So members only, maybe somebody wants to share something, but they don't want to put it publicly out in a larger scale. Available on request, maybe you only have 40 copies to give. This allows people who really want to read your article to be able to reach out. And then just to reiterate how to browse, we have buttons that allow people to very quickly go to our key indexes. And still in the front page, we then shift to having recent content in each of our categories, just to give people some quick access to what it is that we're talking about in the database. And very briefly, our footer will just kind of continue that notion of having the links accessible. Are you all able to see this video? So this is just a brief view of what our indexes look like. So here's an index for publications. And we just wanted something very simple that people could click through. Right now we have content that we're just starting out with, and people can they can choose articles based on these parameters, the field, the language, the access. When they click on a given article, they're able to see the citation information. And if the article is available, they're able to download it. And then we're able to keep track of how many people have downloaded it, or they can click on the URL and see the page where the publication lives. For the aesthetic, just to reiterate, we chose web-safe, large-size fonts. This allows more access for us when we're able, for those of us that have vision issues, high contrast colors for the same reason. And then keeping the design as simple as possible, it also makes it compatible with more devices and more internet speeds. Obviously, there's a barrier of access if you don't have a computer or a laptop or internet, but we at least thought, let's not make this so that you need a very, very high speed internet or the best computer. And then we can send this out later, but we also have some resources at the bottom and some websites that you can use to make sure that your platforms are also as accessible as possible.
Yeah, so as we've mentioned, part of the piece of accessibility and decolonization is to make this platform at least trilingual. So we are starting with Haitian Creole, French, and English. I think ideally in a perfect world, we would also maybe later down the line be able to incorporate Spanish and Portuguese. And this means both that sort of the apparatus will be in those languages, but also that we are translating abstracts and metadata like keywords into all three of those languages. The reason for that is that obviously it is not feasible for us to translate all of the resources themselves, but in translating the abstract, that at least gives people the broad strokes of what a piece is about, and maybe gives them enough to say, oh, this is really interesting to me, so I am going to power my way through a language that takes me longer to read, or I'm going to find someone who can help and support me in understanding this document, something like that. So it's sort of about giving people enough access. Some of the translation challenges that you're going to see, the kind of minimal design can actually make it quite hard to translate, especially into Haitian Creole, where there just sort of isn't the same kind of vocabulary. And yeah, let's go to the next slide and you'll kind of see one of the issues there. So this is one that I was looking at yesterday, and we have a spreadsheet where we kind of have, the English and then the Creole and then the French translation. And so I sort of diligently was filling it out. And then when I saw this yesterday, I thought, oh, that doesn't work at all. So account, for example, that does translate as compte. But when I looked at it, I said to myself, compte quizá, because it also means against. And in this context, it's not clear what compte means. So my first response was like, against what? What are we against? So it made me think, okay, we're going to have to come up with a different way of saying that in Creole. Maybe it'll be profil, like profile or something like that. But it's that kind of thing of looking at it and saying, okay, well, a one-to-one translation actually isn't going to cut it. And we have to figure out the best way to say it in all these languages. Yeah, so that's sort of what I was talking about, is that we have these columns and then these kinds of notes where we're sort of saying, how do we say that? Does contribute sound like we're asking for money and not asking for articles? All these kinds of things that are the kind of puzzles that you have to untease when you're doing translation work.
So now I'll go into what it looks like behind the scenes and realization of all of the roles that we play as we consider all of this information. So I created this outline, if you guys can see it, because we have to consider who will be inputting this data, who will be vetting it, what are some of the design processes that we had to consider, and in the sustainability of it, who will manage the updates. So a lot of the times when people are taking on projects or looking at an aspect of project management, we tend to look at the people that are coming to the table, but not the roles or the workload that is necessary. So here, in essence, what we've presented so far is this level of a workload. So we had a digital team with Darlene beginning with the work and then it going on to Laura, and then we had Lucien Joseph, who was the supervisors of Natália, and then I came on board later on as a secondary supervisor. And so we've made the digital team, and we understood that our outreach was going to be from people, from members who would be aware through social media, through our conferences, the different partnerships and collaborations that we have with our work groups and our committees, as well as the different topics of research and development that HSA scholars and members are engaged in. But we had to make sure that it was feasible, timely, and measurable. So as you can see here, and I'm not going to break down everything, but it was for me understanding the project in the capacity of data collection, in the logistics, in the digitizing the PDFs, how the data would be migrated through all the platforms that we were going to be receiving and giving. Also looking at the research that we would have to do in order to develop a platform in this manner, which was looking at the different subject matters that scholars look at, what would be the data sourcing, engaging with the authors, as well as content development, meaning how would we build this portfolio, as well as where we think that our members would adequately utilize the site. Because one of the things is you don't want to ever design something that is ever underutilized because everybody's not tapping into all the bells and whistles. And then for me, it was definitely looking at the geographic impact of the analysis of, as Darlene said in the very beginning, looking at the fact that we were very Anglo-based, and how were we going to bridge that, and could we analyze our impact as we grew into translation. And then of course the metadata tagging of making sure that these articles and contributions, syllabi, are reaching the proper people through the proper tagging. And then of course the biggest elephant in the room is copyright and citation, making sure that we follow all the proper best practices. And then, as Laura has just covered, the linguistics development. And then technology, understanding the coding, creating a sandbox where we would be able to play with this, test this out, give it to different audiences, and then look at our public facing. How would we make sure that people are seeing and engaging? Next slide, please. So looking at the end user focus, the first thing is building the awareness. We wanted to make sure that we got the word out to all of our members, that this platform was a form of resource and research for them. And then, of course, after we building the awareness is making sure that they have the proper access. And in that effort of, even if they might go through 5 clicks, and we know that 15 things happen to make those 5 clicks happen, but that we try to appear as seamless as possible for the user experience of just going through from level to level. And then the engagement, that the end user can engage with the material and request additional access if needed, making sure that the right protocols are being followed for engagement. And then consistency. Not only that the site has the quantity of materials, but has the quality of service. And when you have these 4 areas of focus for your end user, you start to understand not only what do we have to do behind the scenes, but what do we want them to experience, coming from the knowing, the accessing, the engaging, and the consistency. And the last slide, please. So taking on stakeholders is really developing buy-in, but you have to understand what your stakeholders are going to need, right? So why would someone come to the site? Why would they even visit? Why would they continue to visit? What is it that they want? So the 3 areas that I'm kind of presenting, just because there are more stakeholders in this project than this, but I wanted to kind of cover the 3 major stakeholders that we have. First is the people that are contributing, the authors that are contributing their work. We wanted to make sure, and I just put the word copyright there as a general statement, because even as a professor with a syllabi that I'm sharing, there are certain kind of there's some certain levels of understanding that I have in sharing my material, which is very different from a person who has written an article or written a book and is working with a publishing house. So we had to make sure that our site does not compromise anything that the author wants to contribute, and that we have different levels of giving. The next would be the Haitian Studies Association Board. There are different committees that see this project in different capacities. However, one of the major kind of leads that we took on when we were thinking about our engagement was the Journal of Haitian Studies. So we do have a journal that has been in operations, and they've had a best practice protocol as engaging with authors. We didn't follow it to the letter, but we definitely took some lessons learned that the editor, Claudine Michel, shared with us of, how to engage, what to look at, how is it going to be seen, because our authors contribute as well to this as they do to other journals. And if they wanted to contribute, it wasn't a simple one-on-one. It wasn't just, oh, because it's in the journal, it could automatically come to Haitian Studies Association, to the COMBI platform. So we also had to understand that and where we wouldn't be compromising that. And then the largest, of course, is our members. What type of needs did they have in being able to not only see this work, read this work, but what if they needed it? What if they needed to engage with that? How were they going to reach out and do a request? And what role does HSA play? What role does the digital body play? What role does the author play in responding back to the members upon their requests? So I always emphasize to everyone, when you are working on a project of this magnitude that has all of these arms, you need to understand what the audience, the stakeholders, the people that are contributing to this, the people that are funding this, the people that are giving the authority, and the people that are engaging need for their project, for this to kind of grow. And once you're able to understand that, then you're able to think about the sustainability of it because people's needs are going to change. So as the project goes past its alpha phase and its beta phase, you're going to see different needs start to develop. And once we're able to do that and address that, then we're able to plan ahead for the needs of the project to be maintained. But like I said, this is only 3 of the many other stakeholders that we have involved in the project. So thank you.
So that gives you hopefully some insight of where the project started, what we have done so far, and then hopefully the next steps will be reviewed as we publish the project and as it becomes public and complete for everybody to enjoy. Thank you everybody for giving us this opportunity. Are we going into questions and answers now?
Yep, exactly. I was just going to stop the recording after I thanked you so much for your presentation. It's so interesting to see what you're doing. And I love the ways that you're really bridging that gap between copyrighted material and open access material and making sure that it's accessible for everyone who is interested in this type of research. I think it's very interesting. So let me stop. And I'm going to